My name is Richard Beverly, and I am a commissioner here at the DC Public Service Commission. This first panel is entitled, Who's the Boss? Navigating the Federal and Regional Context to Meet State Clean Energy Goals. I'm going to be brief so as not to keep our panelists waiting and introduce the moderator of this panel, the Honorable Paul Kjellander. Paul is the president of the Idaho Public Utilities Commission and is also the current president of our National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. He is joined on this panel by three respective chairpersons of the Illinois, Pennsylvania, and Maryland commissions, a member of the New York Commission, and the CEO of the largest electricity grid operator in the world, PJM.
Thank you, Commissioner Beverly. Really appreciate that. And I think we all know who the boss is. It's technology. It's always the boss. And I should quit joking that I have 45-minute opening comments because I'm pretty sure that's why they delayed this. So I'd keep my mouth shut and move this forward. Thanks for the introduction. What are we going to be talking about today? Well, it's a little abbreviated, so I'll shorten things up. We're going to be talking about the clean energy goals that many of the states and regions have, and how those states and the District of Columbia can successfully navigate through those jurisdictional realities in this very, very dynamic and rapidly changing landscape that we all operate in. As we look to the not so distant future, we clearly have the potential for conflicting goals, policy directives that will change the scope of the way that we do things, moving targets and jurisdictional responsibilities that are sure to be conflicting as we see the potential for those jurisdictional roles to be blurred and in some instances, depending on who you are, seemingly trampled on. So as we look at all the different pieces of the puzzle that are interstate in nature, the regional nature of markets, transition, permitting and siting, all these things that go across jurisdictional boundaries, as was mentioned in the intro, we have a great group of panelists who are going to be able to offer some perspectives from their states and from their various responsibilities and help us get a clear picture of the path forward. I'm really going to shorten up the short bios that were already provided just to let you know that we have Kerry Zaleski, the chairman of the Illinois Commerce Commission. We have Gladys Brown-Dutrell, the chairman of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission. Jason Stanek, the chairman of the Maryland Public Service Commission. Diane Berman, the commissioner from the New York Public Service Commission. And also Manu Astana, the president and CEO of PJM Interconnection. They're all rock stars, so I won't say anything more. What we'll do is jump right into it. And let's give the virtual stage to Kerry Zaleski from the Illinois Commerce Commission. Kerry?
Thank you, President Kjellander. As President Kjellander mentioned, my name is Kerry Zaleski. I am the chairman of the Illinois Commerce Commission. I do also serve on the board of directors for the Organization of MISO States, which is relevant to today's conversations. First, I must say that these are my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and don't necessarily reflect those of the Illinois Commerce Commission or the commissioners. Thank you to Chairman Phillips and to the DCPSC commissioners for your leadership on pulling together a timely and very important conversation. It's an honor to share the conversation with my esteemed colleagues. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge President Kjellander and his incredible leadership throughout another trying year. Look, clean energy is only becoming a more important and timely conversation as the U.S. tries to build back better in a post-COVID world and in light of the Code Red for Humanity declared under the new UN climate report. The question of how RTOs might adapt to changes in state energy goals is particularly salient in Illinois right now because on September 15th of this year, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker signed into law comprehensive energy legislation, setting an aggressive timetable to reach 100% renewable energy by 2050, doubling our RPS goal, investing in training a diverse work group for the jobs of the future, and making Illinois a leader in the place to drive, own, and manufacture EVs. The nearly 1,000-page legislation speaks to many aspects of the Illinois clean energy economy, but with regard to some of the new authority at the Illinois Commerce Commission, the ICC will now be engaging in grid planning, integrated distribution planning, transportation electrification planning, and a storage study on very tight timelines. On a scale of 1 to very busy, we're going to be very busy. Luckily, we have some of the most dedicated, hardworking staff in state government, plus legislation offers the ability to bring on new staff, and the commission will be engaging in hiring a campaign soon. It's still being sorted out exactly what the law will mean for Illinois' transmission needs and other potential regional effects on the legislation, but undoubtedly, a higher deployment of renewable generation necessitates a need for more robust regional planning. And Illinois has a unique advantage in terms of regional markets and planning. Illinois straddles PJM and MISO RTOs, meaning we must collaborate to some degree with 23 other states and Washington, D.C. to help shape the policy of regional markets and their transmission planning. Now, Illinois is a deregulated retail access state, so we rely on the wholesale market for energy and capacity. This gives us a pointed interest in ensuring that regional markets are robust. We are also the only fully deregulated state in MISO, and this means Illinois often must compromise and find common ground with interests of vertically integrated states. And undoubtedly, we have experienced the benefits of regional markets, and we believe in collaborating with other states in these markets and not letting the perfect be the enemy of good. One interesting facet of being in both OMS and OPSI is that we get to see the different responses that MISO and PJM have to the same federal issues, such as how to implement Order 2222 or different approaches to transmission planning. And while the states that comprise PJM and MISO are different in many ways with different needs and different market designs, it's also true that the two RTOs could be learning more from each other in terms of the responses to shared issues. While Illinois sometimes is able to serve as that link between the policies of the two RTOs, there is always an opportunity for more shared learning. And that's why conversations like this one today is so incredibly important. Lastly, I'm encouraged to see the current FERC as being very receptive to input and states. This is evident from the FERC's establishment of the Office of Public Participation and hosting various technical conferences and workshops. And of course, the recent formation of the Joint Federal State Transmission Task Force, which we're excited to see help address some of the hurdles of transmission planning. The task force is made up of an impressive group of state regulators, including panelists, Chairman Dutrell and Chairman Stanek, who will serve as the vice chair to co-lead the initiative. Chairman Stanek has been a strong voice in collaboration among states and federal issues, and I know we are in good hands with him at the helm of this initiative. In closing, regional planning is now more important than ever, and we're excited to see the FERC collaborating with states and to see states willing to work with each other to address the climate crisis, cybersecurity concerns, and other energy issues. I must add, it's always good to see state regulators continuing the history of serving as commissioners on the FERC, such as Commissioner Christie and President Biden's nominee, Chairman Phillips, as they understand the position that state regulators are in, balancing the different interests of state goals and legislation with the direction that comes from the FERC. Thank you again for the invitation to be a part of this esteemed panel, and I look forward to the conversation.
And thank you, Carrie. And also to let everyone know, our time has been sort of reduced from 1 hour to 30 minutes. So here to help us actualize what the actual definition of regulatory speed of light is, let me pass the floor on to Gladys Brown Dutrell, the chairman of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission.
Good afternoon, everyone. I do thank you, President Kjellander, and I'm up to the challenge of making this brief. Pennsylvania is so happy to be able to participate in this clean energy forum. We are a unique state in the sense of our goals are a little bit different than some of the other states that are represented here in this panel, but they are still goals in terms of clean energy and helping out the environment. We're one of the earlier states that had a alternative energy portfolio standard that was enacted, I think, back in 2004, as putting requirement for our utilities to procure energy, 18% of their energy by the year 2021. And of course, this is 2021, and those goals have been reached by our larger utilities as was required in the legislation. There has been discussion within the General Assembly, as well as the governor, who just came out with his climate goals for 2021, and I'll discuss that later. But there's been a lot of discussion of us revising that, of course, to increase the amount in terms of how much our utilities should procure in terms of clean energy, renewable energy. We also, as a state, have, of course, the different type of renewable energy you hear about in terms of solar and wind, and we've had some incentives provided with that. We have a very robust marketplace in terms of net metering, where we reimburse excess generation at what our statute says full retail value. And we at the commission have interpreted that to be our price to compare, the price that our companies charge in terms of default service. So we are seeing more and more accounts. In May of 2020, we've seen about 31,000 net metered accounts. And I know with some of the additional generation coming online, there's more and more solar that we see as well as wind. Another thing that I would like to discuss in terms of clean energy, in terms of Pennsylvania, is, as I stated before, our governor has come out with his climate change goals and initiatives. And as you know, in any state, the goals and initiatives may not be the same as what the General Assembly would want. So these are not initiatives and goals that have been enacted through legislation, but something that our governor is putting forward, which includes joining RGGI. And this initiative started last year with Governor Wolf enacting, or not enacting, but having regulations go through the process. We're in the final stage of those regulations that would have our state join the RGGI Compact. There is, of course, not agreement necessarily from members of our General Assembly. Our General Assembly is Republican majority controlled, and so there are some differences there. Not sure if that initiative will go forward, but the process is moving forward at this point, and it is definitely a goal of our governor. When I talked about the governor does have climate change action goals that he is pushing forward. Of course, joining RGGI is one of them, but also looking at having more higher energy efficiency standards, as well as increasing the use of electric vehicles. We in Pennsylvania do not have legislation as of yet. It's being discussed, has been discussed for the last couple of years in terms of putting for infrastructure for the electric vehicles. And in the legislation that we have seen over the last couple of years, the PUC will play a big role in terms of that rollout of infrastructure. It may not have passed in legislation just yet, but we have had separate filings that have come before us as a commission for our individual companies that wanted to roll out infrastructure in terms of EV. So we're very encouraged by that. Energy efficiency, as I stated before, we were one of the earlier states in terms of AEPS, as well as an earlier state in terms of energy efficiency requirements. That came within our 2008 legislation. In terms of energy efficiency, we at the PUC play a role in that because we have to implement plans every 3 to 5 years. The first time the law went into place, it was a 5-year plan that we at the commission went down to 3-year plans. And I think we're in currently a 4-year plan that provides incentive for our companies in terms of energy efficiency. And we have seen great benefits from it here in Pennsylvania. Another thing that our governor is looking at in his climate action plan is to increase those levels in terms of energy efficiency. Right now, our legislation provides for energy efficiency for electric distribution, but the governor's suggested goals that he released earlier this week, or it was last week, was to also require gas utilities to meet similar energy saving requirements. So there's a lot of things going on in Pennsylvania. When we look at climate change or reduction of carbon emission, our state moved forward in maybe a different path than some other states because we were reducing carbon emission through the changes we saw in our energy mix, our generation mix, moving more away from coal-fired plants to more natural gas-fired plants because of the fact of the Marcellus Shale that we have here in our state. And we have seen a big reduction in terms of carbon emissions over the years because of that. And I know that we have a short period of time, so I would just leave it at that and be available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Now let's go to Chairman Jason Stanek of the Maryland Public Service Commission. Jason.
Thank you, Mr. President. Glad to see everybody here. For those who don't know, I'm actually sitting right behind the auditorium and have had a front row seat to some of the issues that we've had. The tech team has been working hard to resolve them. So thanks for your patience and bearing with us today. Thanks also for the DCPSC for hosting this event. Maryland shares more than a border with DC. We share a lot of common goals and policies. So this is a great agenda that we're a part of today and will continue later today. I had a little nostalgia with the title, Who's the Boss? For those of us who are old enough to remember, this was a sitcom back in the 1980s, and it actually aired 37 years ago this week. And in that time, over the past 37 years, we've borne witness to lots of terrible actions against our climate and environment. More than half of the greenhouse gas emissions that have been in the atmosphere were produced after 1990. Since 1990, our global temperature for ground level has increased more than 0.5%. Clean energy, and the discussion is on the lips of everybody who's discussing it, whether in Washington, Harrisburg, or Annapolis. You can't help but turn on the news and see issues regarding fires, floods from New York City to Louisiana, droughts, and other issues. And just last week, if you were taking a look at the Science Journal, they said that children growing up today will experience 3 times as many extreme weather events than their grandparents. And that feels about right. Just last month, the remnants of Hurricane Ida caused destruction and havoc across Maryland. We had a tornado touchdown and rip through Annapolis. And Ida is now projected to have caused upwards of $30 billion in damages. So for those who say, well, it might be too expensive to invest in the transmission system, my response is, well, what is the alternative? So these are some issues that we're looking at in Maryland. I won't go through all the good work that we're doing in this state, but we do have an aggressive renewable standard trying to get to 50% by 2030. This is National Drive Electric Week. I think we could all do our part to the extent that you could afford an electric vehicle. Now is the time to reduce your input. And transmission planning, as Chair Zaleski mentioned a moment ago, Chair Brown-Dutrell and myself are on this state federal task force. And I have to admit, transmission policy is in desperate need of reform, and it has been for some time. So I look forward to the remarks from Manu in a moment. But I think it's fair to say that business as usual, whether it be with respect to transmission planning, cost allocation, or generator queue reform, is long overdue. So the question, who's the boss? I think it's more than just the regulators at the federal and the state level. I think it's every individual, every utility executive, every voter in this country, because as we could see from the numbers, we need some action. We need some action now. And I'm looking forward to the cooperation of our colleagues as we move forward. Thank you, President. I yield back.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Commissioner Diane Berman of the New York State Public Service Commission. Diane?
Thank you. I'm going to stay off camera because my internet is a little unstable. So hopefully this will be good. Energy regulation is undergoing a massive change with clean energy, justice, and equity goals being set at both the state and the federal levels. I believe that state and federal regulators play a critical role in this transformation. We have really exciting and challenging times to be a part of this energy transformation. In New York, like some of the other states here, we are really focused on the clean energy transformation and what that means. Our legislature in 2019 set out the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that really established the goals that we should be looking at, and also focused very much on collaboratively working with stakeholders to reach these goals. The first targets are to reach 70% renewables by 2030 and a zero emissions grid by 2040. We do have some technology procurement targets 6 gigawatts of solar by 2025, 3 gigawatts of energy storage by 2030, and at least 9 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2035. The PSC is one regulated focus in the state. There are many other different agencies and others within our state who are looking at specifics to what they are to do to also be a part of the state clean energy goal. One of the things for me is that I think it's really important as we look at this to really look at it in a holistic way. It's not just about meeting our clean energy goals for the sake of meeting our clean energy goals, but really getting under the hood about how we are achieve that, what that means, and an uncompromising need for our focus to be on safety, reliability, and resiliency, and looking at it from an economic viability and a cost containment perspective. We really have to look at it viewed as a whole in the public interest, and what are we doing to achieve that? As Commissioner Stanek talked about who's the boss, I think the question also really is, how are we going to lead? What are we going to do in that role as leaders, working with FERC and the states? From my perspective, transmission and the transmission planning is a critical aspect. We've done a lot in our state to look at what that means, as we're looking at the proliferation of renewable energy sources, electric vehicles, storage, and the emergence of hydrogen and other things. How are we understanding the disruption that's happening to the power markets, and how are we making sure that we're balancing our policies and the development of our efforts with the reliability needs. While we're shifting to transition, we have to do so responsibly, and states need to be cognizant of the risk of making abrupt decisions that could result in catastrophes like California and Texas have experienced. For me, it's also making sure that we're looking carefully at the justice and equity issues and really seeing how that fits within the energy sector, and what are we doing to make sure that we're addressing it in a way that will have long-lasting impact. I think it's great that we're going to have this collaboration with FERC on this task force. However, I will caution that when we look at that task force, there are 5 of the commissioners from FERC that will be on that task force. And while we are addressing every regional aspect of it nationally, it's not every state that is going to be on there. And so we have to be very cognizant of making sure we don't look at this as the ultimate solution, but as one opportunity for us to work with our partners in getting under the hood. FERC, just like state regulators, have dealt with some tension, not just among FERC and the states, but FERC and its other federal regulators, whether it's NERC, TSA, PHMSA, DOE, et cetera. We can see that within our own state, where we as state commission regulators are dealing with some tension among our other state agencies who may have competing interests or a little different take on what it means when we talk about our environmental goals or economic goals, our justice goals. And so I do think it's important for us to keep in mind that this is very much focused on all of us understanding and looking at it not in a vacuum. And so part of that is the overall needs of the federal and the state regulators to be very focused on what it is to be truly listening, so that what we're setting out can be doable, can be sustainable, and can really be practical and sound. And I must underscore before I turn it back over to our moderator that at the end of the day, the real issue for me is system reliability. And we have to really, really be uncompromising in that. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. And before we go to a guy who actually is a boss, Manu Astada, who's the president and CEO of the PGM RTO, we actually have just been told that we have an extra couple of minutes. So feel free to share with us your thoughts and wisdom. Of course, it still needs to be brief, but we look forward to hearing your comments.
Yeah, thank you, President Kjellander, and thank you to Chairman Phillips and the other commissioners in DC for the invitation and for convening this really important conversation. I will try to be succinct in my comments. My name is Manu Astana. I'm the CEO of PJM. And as you know, PJM is a large grid operator. We operate the largest grid in the United States, serving roughly 65 million people across 13 states and the District of Columbia. We were originally formed in 1927, and specifically September 27th, 1927. So yesterday was our organization's 94th birthday, which is really fascinating. I mean, if you just think about all of the transformation and the change that the company has seen over its history, and then look forward to what we're going to see, it really is interesting. PGM is a stakeholder and member-driven organization. We have over 1,000 members and many more stakeholders. And our states and the District of Columbia are amongst our most important stakeholders. And I have to be really careful in what I say because some of our most important stakeholders are here on this virtual stage with me today. But I will say what I always say, which is our industry is rapidly evolving. And this is not some theoretical, hypothetical future change. It is happening now. If you look at PJM's interconnection queue, we have over 230,000 megawatts in our queue. And to give you a sense, our peak load this year was 149,000 megawatts and change. So we have 230,000 megawatts in queue. 90% of that is wind, solar, battery, or some hybrid of those. And so this change is happening now. And my answer to the question, who is the boss, really comes down to, well, who's driving this change? And of course, there's not one entity or one force, but the ones that I picked out, which is a partial list, I mean, number one is consumers. And consumers are voting with their wallet. Right? They want clean, they want reliable, and they want cost-efficient, cheap electricity. And they are making it happen for themselves. There's a lot of commercial activity that is being driven by consumers that is changing the face of the grid. The second group that is the boss, that is driving the change, is policymakers. And in PJM, a lot of the policy that is driving change is being driven by our states and by the District of Columbia. And each of our states is different. So out of the 13 states in the district, 11 states in the district actually have some version of an RPS or clean energy goals or renewable targets. But each of them is slightly different. They have different goals. They have different resource endowments. We've got coastal states that are looking at offshore wind. And so policymakers are a huge driving force. And those are primarily our states. Although at this point, federal policymakers are making a big difference as well. When you look at the two bills that are being debated in Congress today, those will have, if they pass, a major impact on our sector. And so I think the federal policymakers, along with the state policymakers, are the boss, right? Who else? I think FERC is our primary regulator, and they drive a lot of rule changes, and they're trying to be very forward-looking in terms of what they do. Chairman Glick was very clear with us that he really wanted a solution to the MOPR. He gave us a timeline to give him our solution. We worked really hard to come up with something that accommodates our different states, that accommodates public power business models. We should hear back very soon if we met the mark there or not. But FERC is also driving a lot of discussion around distributed energy resources and how those will be integrated into the grid. They're driving a lot of discussion around transmission policy, and that includes interconnection processes, that includes who pays for transmission, which is a very important question. That includes how do you even plan for transmission that hasn't entered your queue yet? How do you plan for transmission that is 5 years out, 10 years out to meet different goals? And we at PJM are working very hard with our stakeholders, with our states, with the district to come up with proposals that meet the mark. And I will say there's not one answer, right? What's important is to try to get to some kind of consensus on the answer and get to an answer that the vast majority of our stakeholders can live with, and then unleash the forces of competition and the forces of markets to deliver those policy goals. And so I think FERC is very much one of the bosses. I also want to point out NERC, because as you think about this transition, I think our policymakers have been very clear about where they want to go, what the end point looks like, 2032 for the district, 2030 for some, 2035, 2050, et cetera. The journey to get from here to there is less clear. And as one of the people that has accountability for keeping the lights on for 65 million people, I look at what happened in Texas. And it's also worth saying what happened in Texas is not a direct result of this energy transition. That's a different deal. But just the fact that a loss of reliability can impact people in so many personal and negative ways, we need to make sure that we nail this transition and we keep the lights on through the transition. And so I think NERC is a very important boss. And then the final one I'll point out is technologists. And I think President Kjellander, you pointed this out as well. There are people today that are innovating on different technologies and different ways to meet the policy goals that we haven't even seen yet. And so this is a really exciting time for our industry. I believe that RTOs can be an important tool to help achieve policy objectives. We're not policymakers. RTOs and markets aren't an end into themselves. They're a powerful tool to help achieve the policies of policymakers. And so I'm really excited to be able to partner with all of our stakeholders, including those here today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. And appreciate your comments. We probably only have about time for one, maybe two questions. So I'll just go ahead and toss this one out. And Jason, I'm going to throw this at you first to respond to so others can kind of think about it. So you're being put on the spot. With so many bosses out there, what do states need to do better in terms of voicing some of their policy concerns and some of the mandates they have to those regional and federal entities that have some jurisdictional role in all this?
States have not necessarily been speaking with one voice with respect to any issue. Obviously, we have NARUC, which serves as a venue to share our concerns. But as you heard from Gladys and Carrie and Diane earlier, we all 50 states in the district have different policies that they're trying to push. And it's left up to Manu in the PJM region to help settle and resolve and hopefully reach some consensus. But we need to work smarter. And I am glad that Chairman Glick, with this creation of a task force using Section 209, is presenting the states with an olive branch, one that we could work together on a same panel and resolve some of these thorny issues. But as Diane just mentioned a moment ago, we still have 50 voices in the room. And in order to achieve something that's other than a least common denominator solution, we really do need to roll up our sleeves. Manu just mentioned the MOPR decision. We should be getting that within the next hour or two. Looking forward to seeing how the states in the PJM region work together to push for MOPR reform. Although I'll note it wasn't a consensus approach. 12 out of 14 jurisdictions were in favor, although 2 did have some concerns. But getting on the page of cooperation is going to help us all.
So why don't I go to Diane real quick? Diane, you come from a unique perspective in New York, where New York has its own RTO. How do you deal with making sure that you get your voice in relationship to your policy goals at the table?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And while we are a single state ISO, which does provide a lot of benefit to us in not having to worry about all of the states coming together in consensus, we do regionally, it impacts us what happens. Decision like Penn East going away directly impacts us, indirectly impacts us, and we do need to look at a lot of that. What I would say is it's really important for us to have true, honest conversations. Credible voices all agree that the energy transition is coming. And so it is important for us to take time to truly understand what the projected changes to our generation mix will be with our, for us, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act targets. But we also have to make sure that while we're doing that, that we understand also that this will come with significant costs, and that we have to plan for that and address it in a way that it makes us legitimate to people who are looking at what those costs are, how it will impact them, and then also that reliability cannot be sacrificed at all on that, because the human costs, if reliability is impacted, is just too great. So for us, it's really important that when we share what our state is doing, I believe personally that we need to ensure that we are addressing the challenges in a credible way, and being open about those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're down to about our last minute and a half. So I want to give Carrie, Gladys, and Manu at least 30 seconds to give us one takeaway, mostly just because I want to hear your voices one more time. Gladys.
I'll go first. I think that continued discussion on all of these issues is very important, because as we come before you in an RTO or even in New York situation, everything that each state does has an impact on the states around them in general. Even when you're talking about, Penn East, that is a big impact. It was delivering gas to other areas. So it's just important for us to continue to come together and give a good understanding or a greater understanding in terms of what a state's needs are when they're pushing their policies forward, but also give a understanding in terms of the impact that it will have on others.
Thank you. Carrie.
Okay, unmuted. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. It's such an important conversation. I just think overall, many of the problems of climate change are collective action problems, and therefore solutions require collaboration. I know we've talked a lot about collaboration today, and big questions facing the grid are no different. Regional collaboration and interregional collaboration are clearly going to play a very important role in addressing the problems of climate change as we bring more renewables online. And
Carrie, we had a freeze up on you, so we're going to go straight to Manu and give him the final word. We apologize for that technical glitch. Manu?
Yeah, thank you for that. I will say, I think this is a really exciting time. And I think we collectively face some very big challenges. And I am very proud of the way that our stakeholders at PJM have come together to, at some points, tell us that we're wrong, tell each other that they're wrong, to come up with ideas. But that process, that stakeholder process, and the more transparent it is, the better, I think leads to challenge and leads to the best collective solution. And so another way of saying, I really encourage all of us to please continue to bring our best ideas to the table and push each other to try to solve this problem collectively. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your comments. And I want to thank all the panel members for their patience today, and also for their comments and for their generous nature in shortening those comments so that we could stay on track. So thanks again to everyone there. I look forward to seeing all of you hopefully soon in person. Let's not forget the annual meeting coming up for NARUC in November. It's going to be in person. We look forward to seeing you. And with that, thanks again to everyone. And this specific panel is done, and I'll hand it off to whoever's next.